Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. India's second wave continues to kill. The world has stopped flights from India. That's the first step that countries take to contain the spread. But if the last year has taught us anything, it is this. The Wuhan virus does not respect borders. Just like its country of origin, China, no respect for borders. So the virus jumps, as do its mutations. The only way to contain it is to vaccinate more and more people. And I know I might sound like a broken record because I say this every day, but it's the most critical thing right now. So I'll say it one more time. To vaccinate more people, we need more vaccines and we need to do away with patents. The World Trade Organization is meeting tomorrow to discuss this. India and South Africa have been pushing for a patent waiver since October last year. Now, 100 countries back their call for a patent waiver, but blocking their path are rich Western nations. Tonight, we'll discuss why these governments are towing the line of big pharma and putting profits and patents above lives. Also, as the pressure builds on them and as the mutants wreak havoc, will these countries see why patent waivers help everyone, including themselves? Also on the show tonight, India and the UK have signed a major trade deal. A part of it is the 2,400 crore rupee investment that India's Serum Institute will make in the UK. We'll break down the deal for you to answer the one question that everyone has been asking: who benefits from it? The undiplomatic spat between the Philippines and China is still making headlines. New Zealand has spoken about China too, as have G7 countries. We'll tell you what they've said. A Cameroonian woman falls on her knees before the Prime Minister of Australia to stop what she calls a genocide in her country. We'll tell you what's happening in Cameroon. And will this be the most expensive divorce yet in the world? Bill and Melinda Gates have decided to part ways after 27 years of marriage. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
The 14th edition of the Indian Premier League has been suspended by the Board of Control for Cricket in India, or BCCI, owing to the spate of COVID-19 cases among players and support staff in different franchises. Players including Varun Chakravarti, Sandeep Warrier have tested positive for the virus while in the tournament's biosecure bubble. American pharma company Pfizer says that it has informed the Indian government that there are no safety concerns over its COVID-19 vaccine. This as India insists on small local trials for foreign vaccines, despite a deadly second wave of infections. US President Joe Biden urges wealthy Americans and corporations to pay their fair share and fund free community colleges in America.
Do we want to give the wealthiest people in America another tax cut? Or do you want to give every high school graduate the ability to earn a community college degree?
Should Biden's proposed agenda become law, children would be entitled to 17 years of free schooling from age 3 to 2 years of community college. Egypt signs a contract with France to buy 30 Rafale fighter jets in a deal that is reported to be worth $4.5 billion. This after French President Macron had said he would not make sale of weapons to Egypt conditional on human rights, since he didn't want to weaken the country's ability to fight terrorism. Bangladesh extends its ongoing nationwide lockdown till May 16th to stem its second wave of COVID-19 infections. Inter-district bus, train and ferry services would remain suspended while public transport services will continue to operate within cities. Amid the political deadlock in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu offers his longtime right-wing rival Naftali Bennett a year in office through a power-sharing deal. All this in a last-ditch effort to form a new coalition after Israel's fourth inconclusive election in 2 years. Italy unveils a new high-tech floor for its famous Colosseum, which will give visitors a clear idea of how the arena would have looked like when it hosted gladiator fights. An Italian engineering firm won the $22.2 million contract to design the new flooring. The project is expected to be completed by 2023. At least 23 people killed and 65 hospitalized when a railway overpass and train collapsed onto a busy road in Mexico City on Monday night, crushing cars under rubble. Initial rescue efforts saw medical and fire crews along with the army trying to assess the situation. Jose Mourinho has been appointed as the new manager of Italian football club Roma on a 3-year contract from next season. The Portuguese coach had been sacked by Tottenham Hotspur just 3 weeks ago after 17 months in charge, following a poor second half of the season. Roma are currently 7th in the Serie A. Mourinho will replace Paulo Fonseca, who has been in charge for the last 2 seasons. World number 3 Simona Halep has crashed out of the Madrid Open following a close defeat to Elise Mertens in the round of 16. Halep led the Belgian 4-1 in the head-to-head meetings, but the two-time champion squandered a set advantage on this occasion and succumbed to a 4-6, 7-5, 7-5 scoreline after 2.5 hours. There were no such troubles for 5th seed Aryna Sabalenka though, as she thrashed Jessica Pegula 6-1, 6-2 to advance to the quarter-finals.
20 million infections and counting. India has become the second country in the world to pass this grim milestone. The first one is the United States. And what a steep surge it has been for India. Look at these numbers. It took more than 10 months for India to add the first 10 million cases. 10 months for 10 million. And just 4 months to add the second 10 million. More than double the pace of infection. That's how fast this virus is now spreading. Is the worst then behind us? It's hard to say. In the last 24 hours, India has added another 350,000 cases, more than 350,000 new cases. Slightly less than yesterday, but hardly a figure that gives any relief. India's active cases now represent 17% of the total caseload. More than 3 million people are currently positive. Imagine the kind of burden that puts on the health infrastructure. 3 million positive people. Over 16 million patients have recovered. The death toll is still mounting, close to 3,500 deaths in the last 24 hours, and the bad news does not end there. There are now reports of a new mutation. It is called the N440K variant, or the AP variant. That's a reference to the Indian state of Andhra Pradesh, AP. That's where this variant was first detected. Everything about this variant is alarming, we're told. Reports say the variant has already moved beyond Andhra Pradesh. It has been found in 20 to 30% of the samples tested in Karnataka, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu and Telangana. The strain is said to be at least 15 times more virulent than the earlier ones. 15 times more virulent, which means it spreads even faster. It has a shorter incubation period and the infection spreads much more rapidly within the human body. All of these are initial observations. Of course, more studies are needed to confirm these findings. But this is a worrying development nonetheless, not just for India, but for the rest of the world too, because there's no telling which form and shape this virus takes next. And vaccines are the only way to control it, not borders and flight bans. We should all know this by now. Variants are making India's fight harder because these new mutations are far more infectious than what we saw in the first wave, what we saw last year. In fact, that's a question that many have also asked. Why is the second wave so much more devastating than the first one? It's been the trend across the world. The second wave has come with a cocktail of dangerous mutants. The virus is behaving differently. It is spreading faster. Earlier, the virus spread through droplets in the air, through coughing or sneezing. But now you can get infected just by speaking to a carrier. So more people are getting infected and their condition is worsening much faster. This gives doctors less time to respond. Our next report tells you how mutants are exacerbating India's pandemic crisis.
The South African variant, the UK variant, the Brazilian variant, and the double mutant. You may have heard of these Wuhan virus mutations by now. While the extent of their spread remains unclear, experts believe all these variants are in wide circulation in India. And they are making the job of India's frontline workers harder. These mutations spread far more quickly than before. Going by one estimate, they can spread from one patient to the next 20 to 50% more easily. As a result, more people are getting infected. Earlier, a patient could easily isolate at home without putting other family members at risk. Now, entire families are getting infected. Dr. Dudul Mandal, a senior oncologist in Delhi, recently recovered after contracting the virus. His family was infected too. Dr. Mandal believes the behavior of the virus has changed.
Infectivity has increased. Hardly there are families when people are now being spared. It's entering a family and the entire family is being infected. That is the most common situation what we are seeing now. I have patients where almost 17% of a single family, all of them are positive.
Anecdotal evidence suggests that patients suffering from a moderate or serious illness suffer from high and persistent fever. Some are developing blood clots. That increases the risk of death. Beyond a persistent cough and loss of smell and taste, patients are now also complaining of headaches, conjunctivitis, rashes, and diarrhea. Until last year, experts believe India saw a much milder strain of the virus, but the newer variants are beating the immune response of the human body. Even those who tested positive before and recovered are getting infected again. The Indian Council of Medical Research, or ICMR, conducted an investigation recently. They found that reinfection is rare, but a real possibility. Out of 1,300 individuals ICMR assessed, 4.5% were reinfected. A cocktail of variants is driving India's second wave. And the disease is proving to be fatal for more patients. Experts believe these variants infect the cells of the body far more quickly. Patients now need oxygen in less than a week. Cases are becoming severe in a matter of a few days, leading to more serious patients, increased hospitalizations, and even deaths. Hospitals are now adopting different protocols, instead of sticking to a fixed formula to treat different patients.
So whenever I'm speaking to our other physician colleagues, chest physician colleagues, the perception is now this 5th to 8th day is much more crucial compared to last year's 10th to 14th day. So there, the common assumption now is, the common perception is now, you wait, observe for 5 days, and if there are signs of high risk, you start treating them after 5th day. Do not waste that precious time of 5th to 8th day.
2021 was supposed to be the beginning of the end of this pandemic, but the virus is fighting back with mutations. For healthcare workers in India, the task to defeat the virus has just got tougher. Bureau Report, World is One.
We've said this before and we'll say it again. Vaccines are the only way out of this crisis. But vaccine making has become exclusive, almost like a cartel. And we know how cartels work. They're ruthless and unwavering, just like Big Pharma. They're still clinging on to patents. They're still putting profits above human lives. So it's time for governments to step in and dictate Big Pharma. India and South Africa are doing this. They took the lead in October last year. They pushed for a patent waiver at the World Trade Organization. As expected, the West pushed back. Now they have a second chance. The WTO will meet again on Wednesday. India and South Africa are presenting a fresh draft. Will they be second time lucky? It's hard to say. A lot depends on Joe Biden. If the United States changes position, the West will follow. So what exactly has Joe Biden said about the patent waiver? The answer depends on which Joe Biden you're talking about. The candidate or the president? Let me show you a video from 2020. This is Joe Biden, the candidate on the campaign trail, promising to waive patents. Listen to this.
If the US discovers a vaccine first, will you commit to sharing that technology with other countries? And will you ensure there are no patents to stand in the way of other countries and companies mass producing those life-saving vaccines?
Absolutely, positively. This is the only humane thing in the world to do.
No scope for interpretation there. Joe Biden said a patent waiver was the most humane thing to do. But as president, he has backed patents so far. More than 100 US Congress members have asked President Biden to waive patents. What is stopping him? The cartel we told you about, Big Pharma. The US Trade Office is apparently holding talks with some stakeholders. But guess who these stakeholders are? Moderna, Pfizer, AstraZeneca. And of all people, Bill Gates, the man who has openly rubbished patent waivers. Also pushing back is the US Chamber of Commerce. They have called the idea of a patent waiver a mistaken belief. So these are the people that Joe Biden is consulting on whether patents should be waived. Big Pharma and patent darlings. Of course, it's possible that he decides to support the waiver anyway, but the damage has already been done. Vaccine production has been set back by months. So even if patents are waived now, and they should be, better late than never, it's a big if they will be waived now, we're looking at a long road ahead. First, reverse engineering, meaning you break down the formula and you create the vaccine from scratch. Then you conduct clinical trials on those new vaccines. A patent waiver is not sharing the formula. It basically only means that you're allowed to copy the formula. All this is going to take time. So Joe Biden's delay may have doomed the developing world already. But let's not lose sight of the real villain here. Big Pharma, they've always defended patents. And pandemic or not, their arguments never change. They make two key arguments. Number one, patents boost innovation. And number two, voluntary sharing is a better option. Tonight we'll talk about the first one. Do patents really boost innovation? Is that their only incentive? Well, not quite. During this pandemic, Big Pharma had a big cushion, an insurance of sorts. We're talking about public funding. Look at how much money each country has spent. The US launched Operation Warp Speed. Do you know how much money they gave pharma giants? $18 billion. $18 billion of the taxpayers' money. In the UK, they got nearly $116 million. Most of it went to Oxford and AstraZeneca. Overall, $112 billion of public money went into vaccine research in the pandemic. $112 billion. So people funded the vaccines with tax money. But once the vaccines were ready, Big Pharma locked away the formula. What about profits? Pfizer revealed their revenue projections today. They're expecting $26 billion from vaccine sales in 2021. That's a profit of more than $3 per share. What about Moderna? They've never turned a profit in history, but this year they could rake in up to $20 billion in vaccine sales. AstraZeneca already reached $275 million in a single quarter. Will this translate into profits? We don't know. But some companies have promised to sell at cost. Some, like Pfizer, have not. But one thing is for sure, there are no losses. Combined with the public funding, chances are every vaccine maker is making good money. So billions of dollars in grants and billions of dollars in sales and pre-orders, what more does Big Pharma want? They're basically raiding treasuries, in the middle of a pandemic. Vaccine makers do not need patents to innovate. They have enough incentive from government funding and profits. The other big problem is hoarding. We've already talked about this. More than 1 billion doses have been administered globally. 82% of these were in the developed world. only 0.3% in the low-income countries. This is vaccine apartheid. At this rate, the virus will keep mutating in Africa and Asia, and this pandemic will drag on for years. Look at the US, for instance. It has secured nearly 1 billion doses, 1 billion, for 300 million Americans. Unless the CDC has advised 3 shots per person, this is hoarding. And it's been days since the White House promised to share its AstraZeneca doses, but American regulators are yet to approve the jab, so they're just sitting on the shelves. 60 million doses waiting to be administered. Let me end by saying this. The Wuhan virus pandemic has bunched up the mob bosses. It has revealed ultra-nationalism in the West. It has shown us the nexus between big pharma and governments. But tomorrow at the WTO, they all have a chance at redemption. And this is one of those rare instances where we are hoping to be proven wrong. We also need vaccines for children if we want to reach herd immunity. But by when will we have a vaccine for children? We asked this question yesterday, and tonight I'm happy to share that we might be one step closer to an answer. Pfizer-BioNTech, the world's leading vaccine producer, is planning to authorize vaccination for children by next week. Another major vaccine maker, Novavax, has started the clinical trials of its vaccine for children. Which age group will these vaccines cover? How different will the vaccines be from the one for adults? Will they contain different antigens? Will they have different side effects? And which countries are prepared to vaccinate children? Our next report answers all these questions.
COVID-19 has made us all realise just how much we take for granted. The freedom to get outside and spend time with our families and friends. The chance to hug the people that we love. But we will do these things again. We will be together again. And vaccines will... So please don't wait. Vaccinate yourself, vaccinate your children. We will get through this together, and vaccines will help us do that.
Children may be less susceptible to the Wuhan virus, but vaccinating them is just as important as vaccinating adults. Any child, be it a 14-year-old or a 4-year-old, can catch the infection or become a carrier of the disease, infecting families and friends. Immunizing children is also important for building herd immunity in any population. By when can we expect a vaccine for children? By next week, if you're in the United States. America's Food and Drug Administration is preparing to authorize the use of Pfizer-BioNTech for adolescents, but only children aged 12 to 15 will be eligible to get a shot. For kids below this age group, the FDA is expected to approve vaccines by the fall of 2021. The announcement comes barely a month after Pfizer found that its shot was effective on children. In March, the company released a preliminary study of 2,260 American volunteers, all of them between the age group of 12 to 15. There were no cases of infections among those fully vaccinated. Were there any side effects? Yes, but similar to those seen in young adults. Pain, fever, chills, and fatigue, all of which were reported particularly after the second dose. But why did a vaccine for kids take so long? Because the immune system in kids can vary greatly depending on age. A 16-year-old will have a very different immunity response from a 6-year-old. So, unlike adults, kids cannot be lumped together in a wide age group. Their growth and development has to be taken into consideration while evaluating vaccines. So will the vaccines for children be different than those for adults? Not really. The molecular structure of the vaccine remains the same, only the dose is reduced depending on the age. How close are we to getting a vaccine for kids? Here's where the current pediatric trials stand. Moderna is conducting 2 separate trials for children aged 12 to 17 and children below 12 years of age. Johnson & Johnson is conducting trials on the 12 to 17 age group as well. Volunteers are being enrolled in Spain and the United Kingdom. AstraZeneca began a similar trial in the United Kingdom earlier this year, but it was halted after reports of rare blood clots. And lastly, Novavax is conducting similar trials. 3,000 adolescents aged 12 to 17 are involved in the program. What about India? In March, 54 students at a school in Haryana tested positive for the virus. Similar large outbreaks have occurred among students in other cities. But so far, vaccination has only been opened for the 18 to 45 age group. As for adolescents, India is depending on Western regulators to approve vaccines. When regulators in America and Europe give the go-ahead, India will follow suit. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
India and Britain are charting out a post-Brexit roadmap. It promises to be a long and drawn-out process, but today there was some initial success. The two sides clinched a major investment deal. It's worth nearly $1.4 billion US. Both sides are calling this an early win, a precursor to the real deal, which is a free trade agreement to the FTA. Talks on the FTA will begin later this year, but for now let's focus on the investment deal that they've struck today. You will soon see a lot of Indian companies in the UK market. The Global Gene Group is planning to invest $81 million. Wipro is charting a $22 million project. Sterlite Technology, $20 million. But one name sticks out in the list, and it is the biggest investor. Right now, also a controversial one. The Serum Institute of India. They're planning to invest $332 million. Roughly 2,400 crore Indian rupees. That's a lot of money. So where are they planning to invest this? In three specific sectors. One is a sales office, two, clinical trials and research, and three, manufacturing facilities. And the last one is still being built as a possibility. So Serum may or may not make vaccines in Britain. But here's a question. Why is Serum putting money into foreign markets when India is facing shortages? Remember, Adar Poonawalla asked the government of India for additional funds. He said that he needed money to expand capacity to make more vaccines. So the central government announced 3,000 crore rupees in grants. Announced, that's $400 million. The finance minister of India was quoted as saying as much. So is this UK expansion separate from the situation in India? And if it is, then can we safely make one conclusion that the Serum Institute has sorted out shortages in India? So it is now focusing funds on new markets like the United Kingdom. But Adar Poonawalla himself has said that shortages will continue until July. So which is it? If you ask the Serum Institute, this is their answer. Expansion does not happen overnight. And for now, we'll have to take their word for it. But let's take a step back from this institute and talk about the trade deal, because there's a lot more there. Boris Johnson believes it will create 6,500 jobs. He's also hoping to double bilateral trade by 2030. Right now it stands at $32 billion. So what's in it for the British and what's in it for India? Producers of British fruit and medicines will now have easier access to the Indian market. In return, Indian multinationals have an easy investment path. We mentioned some of these companies at the start, but this is just a taste of the real potential. What Britain really wants is for India to drop its barriers and tariffs. For India, immigration is the big issue. New Delhi wants the UK to relax immigration rules, especially for Indian students who wish to work in the UK. And this is going to be a very difficult balance because remember, Boris Johnson's Brexit campaign centered around tougher immigration laws. And it's not just trade, of course. The deal has strategic implications as well. It was announced ahead of a virtual summit between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The British PM was supposed to make a trip to India. But that's when the second wave intensified. So the summit was converted into a virtual one. The second time this year that he's had to cancel his visit to India. India is a big part of Britain's post-Brexit future. Boris Johnson wants a bigger role in the Indo-Pacific, and he pegs India as a key partner in the region. Today's talks focused on expanding this partnership. So what were the big takeaways? Both leaders agreed to elevate bilateral ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. The key focus area was the Indo-Pacific. India and the UK have agreed to fight for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Their militaries will be holding joint drills, collaborating on research and development. On trade, they've agreed on an enhanced trade partnership, which is expected to lead to a free trade deal, free trade agreement in the coming years. And here there's a special focus on green businesses and climate-friendly projects. So that's what happened at the virtual summit today. A big trade deal, some strategic commitments. And these are two nuclear powers, remember, two of the biggest economies in the world, and their interests are converging, not to mention two democracies. Politically, they're coming together against common threats. And as they say in geopolitics, money is the best denominator. So trade could be the cornerstone of a robust India-UK partnership. Meanwhile, in the South China Sea, it's down to trash talking. The Philippines has tried everything to repel the Chinese armada. First, they made a peaceful appeal. China did not budge. Then their navy ordered the PLA to leave. That didn't work either. So now their top diplomat has let loose on social media. This is what their foreign secretary, the Philippines foreign secretary, wrote on Twitter. Unfortunately, I cannot read it out for you because the language is quite colorful. But let me say this. Most of the world shares this sentiment, and they're tired of being bullied by China. The foreign secretary did not stop there. He compared China to an ugly oaf. Now, this may sound outrageous to many, but if you skim through his Twitter feed, you'll find this is his style. He once said, usual suave diplomatic speak gets nothing done. And with China, that's actually the case. Beijing did respond to the comments. They said megaphone diplomacy does not work. Look who's talking. China has hundreds of wolf warriors spreading propaganda for a living. If that is not megaphone diplomacy, what is? So the war of words continues on the one side, but what about the Chinese vessels in Filipino waters? They're still there, on the longest fishing expedition in human history. We're closing in on 2 months here. So either the Chinese really love their fish, or these men are just really bad at fishing. The reality, of course, is neither. These are not fishing boats at all. These are PLA warships. Since 2016, the Philippines has filed 78 diplomatic protests against China. All of them have been ignored. So President Duterte is changing tack. He's pursuing a harder line, more maritime patrols, and zero negotiations on sovereign waters. But the Philippines is just a tryout. China wants total Pacific domination. And it's got a new weapon to do just that. The Jin-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, or the Type 094A. It was unveiled last Friday on the PLA Navy's 72nd anniversary. What's so special about this submarine? It is armed with a long-range missile. By long range, I mean 10,000 kilometers, which means the missile can theoretically hit anywhere in the US mainland. The missile is called the JL-3. It can carry multiple warheads, including nuclear ones, and the payloads are devastating. Experts say it is almost 67 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. So this is a weapon of mass destruction in all senses, a clear sign of escalation. How vulnerable does this leave the US? You see, there are a string of American bases guarding the Pacific. China's new sub will have to slip past all of these to enter striking distance. And this is where China has always faltered. Their weapons are clunky and loud. So American radars pick them up easily. This new submarine is supposedly different, but we haven't seen it in action. And we hope we don't. So we'll have to take China's word for it. Just like the Philippines, most Pacific nations are running out of patience with China. The latest one to speak out is New Zealand. Until now, they've largely stayed away from direct comments. A live and let live approach. But on Monday, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern admitted that the differences are becoming harder to reconcile.
And it will not have escaped the attention of anyone here that as China's role in the world grows and changes, the differences between our systems and the interests and values that shape those systems are becoming harder to reconcile. This is a challenge that we and many other countries across the Indo-Pacific region, but also in Europe and other regions, are also grappling with.
This is not a change in stance. This is not a promise of a hawkish China policy. This is an admission. And it's important because this is another country voting against a China-led world order. So what is the world planning to do about it? Plans are being drawn on the other side of the globe, in London. That's where the G7 is meeting. On today's agenda are China and Russia. The talks are expected to cover two bases. One is upholding democracy and human rights, and the second is building a rules-based international order. In other words, counter China. America's top diplomat Antony Blinken outlined the group's plan ahead of the talks. Listen in.
President Biden's been very clear for a long time, including before he was president, that if Russia chooses to act recklessly or aggressively, we'll respond. But we're not looking to escalate. We would prefer to have a more stable, more predictable relationship. It is not our purpose to try to contain China or to hold China down. What we are trying to do is to uphold the international rules-based order that our countries have invested so much in over so many decades, to the benefit, I would argue, not just of our own citizens, but of people around the world, including, by the way, China.
The West has been talking China for a long time, but the G7 could be a game changer. This is a group with a combined economy of $40 trillion, not to mention 3 nuclear powers. So if the plan is to make China pay, the G7 is the place to start. We'll be watching. How far can we humans go to save our loved ones? This pandemic has shown us that there is no end really. We have left no stone unturned in helping our loved ones who are battling to breathe as healthcare systems crumble to their knees. And then there are some who are falling on their knees in front of a foreign leader, in front of the whole world, in fact, for the sake of their family. Our story begins in Australia. Prime Minister Scott Morrison was addressing the media in a city called Rockhampton. After the press conference, a woman approached Morrison and fell to her knees. Look at this.
There's a genocide going down. Yes. I've lost all of my family. Yeah. I have no family left. We don't have it. Everybody will die. Help me. Help me. Help me.
I've got my team here, Michelle's team's here.
Yeah, I've got Michelle.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to her about the job and done anything. Every day my people are being killed.
Yeah.
I go through trauma every day. Help me.
Well, we'll do everything. We're bringing many people across under our refugee program from Africa, so we are doing that. And if there are family members or others who are part of that process, I know Michelle will pursue those matters with the Immigration Minister, okay?
The woman you saw, her name is Lillian. She's from Cameroon. She left her home country in 2009 and she's been living in Australia since. But back in Cameroon, her family is in danger. Lillian has already lost 8 family members, and thousands of miles away from home, she says she's living through trauma every day. She says there's a genocide in Cameroon. So why is no one talking about it? Let's find out.
Sandwiched between Nigeria, Chad, the Central African Republic, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon and Republic of the Congo is the country of Cameroon. Nicknamed Miniature Africa for its multiculturalism. Cameroon is home to 26 million people, speaking 24 different languages. But diversity can sometimes be disastrous. The people of Cameroon know this far too well. Today, this Western African country is caught in multiple conflicts. In the far north, attacks by Boko Haram have become a daily affair. People are being killed and kidnapped. Their property and lives are being destroyed. In the southwest, there is an Anglophone crisis. English-speaking Cameroonians make for 20% of the country's population. Many of them feel marginalized. Their demand for federalism has turned violent. And civilians in the region are caught in the crossfire between the Cameroonian armed forces and the separatists. Cameroonian forces have been accused of extrajudicial killings and unlawful detention, both in the west and the north. Between the 17th and 20th of January 2020, security forces destroyed 50 homes in northwestern Bali. Several people were killed, including the specially abled. 21 civilians were massacred in a separatist area in Garbu last year, following which the United Nations called on Cameroonian government to respect international laws. This is Cameroon's president, Paul Biya. He is 88 years old and has been in office for nearly 4 decades. In 2018, when Cameroonian soldiers were caught on camera killing 2 women and 2 children, Biya's government dismissed the video and called it fake. A trial, and 2 years later, the same soldiers were found guilty of murder. Paul Biya is nowhere in the picture. In fact, he barely makes public appearances anymore. They say there is only one thing the leader is interested in, that is remaining in office till death, and handing over this throne to his son. As we speak, the people of Cameroon are being brutalized by terrorists and armed forces. The situation is dire, and most of us would not have learnt about it had it not been for this woman's desperate appeal.
I'm just one in this country, I'm alone in this country. Yeah. I can't go home to visit the family.
Well, Michelle, we'll get Michelle here to help you, okay?
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank
Okay?
you.
Okay?
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. It's okay. No, you don't need to do that. We'll get...
Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Islamophobia. Until the 21st century, most of us had not even heard of this term. But in the last 20 years, especially after the 9/11 attacks, everyone, from clerics to activists to Islamic leaders, has complained about a collective persecution of Muslims. And there's no denying the fact that Islamophobia exists, just like anti-Semitism, for instance. But is Islamophobia exaggerated? Has it become a political tool, a way to silence the critics of Islam? I ask this because criticism of a religion is not the same as discrimination against its followers. And it is very important to make this distinction. And we'll make it tonight because some leaders are deliberately blurring the line for their selfish political interests. Let's tell you about one such. Imran Khan Niazi, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, he has surrendered before Islamist radicals in his country, and now he's trying to champion the fight against Islamophobia. He has urged the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, to vehemently counter what he calls growing Islamophobia. He says Western nations are falsely equating Islam with radicalism and terrorism. Which Western nations are these? Well, he did not take any names, probably because he cannot afford to. Anyway, Imran Khan held a meeting with over 30 OIC ambassadors in Islamabad. And the images are on your screen. At this meeting, the Pakistan Prime Minister is said to have told the ambassadors 4 things. 1. Islamic countries have failed to convince the West that blasphemy of the Prophet Muhammad cannot be considered freedom of expression. 2. Islamophobic acts are fanning interreligious hatred and disharmony among civilizations, and they need to be addressed. Point number 3. Every incident of terrorism is being used to malign the entire Islamic world and is contributing to the marginalization of Muslims. And 4, that Pakistan is committed to promoting universal values of tolerance, mutual respect, and coexistence among all people. Now, there is merit in what Imran Khan is saying, because too often a fringe is used to define a majority, and that's wrong. But Pakistan, which uses terror as a state policy, should be the last one to say any of this. Also, will Imran Khan dare to raise the same points with Pakistan's iron brother China? He talks about blasphemy against Prophet Muhammad. China's state-run CCTV aired an entire portrait of the Prophet in October last year, which apparently is blasphemous. Has he raised it with the Chinese? He talks about Islamophobic acts. China raised mosques to build toilets in Xinjiang. Is this Islamophobic? He talks about marginalizing Muslims. China is torturing thousands of Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps, the people that Imran Khan says he does not know much about. He talks about Pakistan's commitment to promote universal values of tolerance, mutual respect, coexistence. I don't even have to explain why this is ironic, but I'll do it anyway. Let me show you a video. It's from a church in a Lahore hospital where Muslim nurses took over the church, threatened their Christian colleagues with conversion, and recited a Naat, which is an Islamic prayer. Watch this. This happened in a church. Why would they do such a thing? Because blasphemy. The nurses were outraged after a controversial video of the Prophet was uploaded by an unidentified man in France. So they retaliated and targeted a church in Lahore. Mutual respect and coexistence. As for the growing Islamophobia that Imran Khan has brought up, he's mostly referring to France, we know that, and the publication of the Prophet's caricatures in Charlie Hebdo, a magazine that has mocked everybody from rabbis to Jesus Christ, because the freedom to blaspheme, we're told, is deeply entrenched in the French society. France upholds this right, irrespective of which religion is mocked. What have they got in return? Islamic terror, stabbings, car rammings, beheadings. What has France done to end this? Upheld its constitution, shut down one mosque, arrested a few extremists, and curbed the funding of clerics by Islamic countries. France has cracked down on extremism, not on Islam. Two different things. But Imran Khan sees no difference, because his narrative is to appease radical Islamists in Pakistan, who not too long ago, by the way, held the country hostage, threatening to kill the French ambassador. First, the Pakistan Prime Minister responded with force. He failed. Now he's using faith to keep his country stable. He's also, by the way, using his acting skills to keep his country entertained, and the rest of us too. It's been a long time since Mr. Imran Khan played chauffeur to a Saudi prince. So he's driving on the streets of Islamabad, telling people to wear masks, with a camera person following him everywhere, and a background score that would put movies to shame. You can't afford to miss this.
कैसी ये हवाएं चली कदम बढ़ा फिर से वो लम्हा दोहरा जब जीत के आया था फिर से वतन को जिता कदम बढ़ा
The wedding of the decade. It's a phrase that we're all familiar with. The last time it was used was when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle walked down the aisle. Today, everyone is talking about what's been called the biggest divorce of the decade, the Gates divorce. After 27 years of marriage, Bill and Melinda Gates have announced their decision to part ways. Will the end of their marriage also bring an end to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation? And what about the couple's enormous wealth? How will that be split? While we do not know what qualifies as the biggest divorce of the decade, the Gates may just have announced what may be the most expensive divorce in history.
After a great deal of thought and a lot of work on our relationship, we have made the decision to end our marriage. This announcement was posted by Bill and Melinda Gates on their individual social media handles. Like every other celebrity divorce, within a minute, the words were copy-pasted and flashed as headlines. But unlike most celebrity divorces, when it came to the Gates divorce, no one wanted saucy details. All questions instead were about the divorce sentiment. Will it be the most expensive divorce in history? The headlines asked. Bill Gates is the co-founder of Microsoft. It was at Microsoft that he met Melinda. The couple married in Hawaii in 1994. 6 years later, they launched the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It is America's largest private philanthropic foundation. Today, it has assets worth nearly $43.3 billion. Bill Gates alone is worth $130.5 billion. And Melinda is a published author and businesswoman. They were the ultimate power couple, the world's fourth richest people, with homes in 5 American states, 242,000 acres of farmland across 18 states, a fleet of cars, a $2 million Porsche, an art collection worth millions, the $30 million Da Vinci Codex, and private jets. Not one, but an entire fleet. What happens to all of this now? The duo has confirmed that they will continue to work together at the foundation. As for their assets, they will reportedly be split according to a separation contract. At stake is $150 billion and no prenup. Will it be the most expensive divorce in history? Perhaps. Currently, the Bezos divorce tops that list. In 2019, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos paid $38 billion to settle the divorce with then-wife Mackenzie. 10 years before that, late American billionaire Alec Wildenstein paid $3.8 billion to settle his divorce with Jocelyn Wildenstein. Their divorce remains the world's second most expensive. Also featuring on the list is Tiger Woods' divorce from Ellen Nordegren. The golfing legend and Ellen Nordegren parted ways in 2001 following Tiger Woods' sex scandal. And back then, he was the world's wealthiest sports star. The divorce cost him $710 million. Who knew that falling out of love would be so expensive? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
That it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching and stay safe.